And we're back in the Diamond Lane on Classic 107 with me, your host, Sarah Jo. And last night, I went to a fascinating new show which opened last week at Prairie Theatre Exchange, which illuminates the bicycle's century-and-a-half evolution and its role as emancipator of the quote-unquote fairer sex. Evalyn Parry's Spin, running until January 31st, is a multimedia spectacle full of as much quirk as class, that takes its audiences on Annie Londonderry's bicycle ride around the globe in a time when the Western world was still scandalized by the sight of a woman's ankle. The recounting of the unbelievably true story is smattered with lore, mostly of Annie's own design, and injected with Parry's elastic personality and activist spirit. The gifted storyteller, joined by a very fine string trio and a bicycle percussionist, presents what one would think would be a lauded legend. Perhaps the tale of Annie Londonderry, the fiercely independent feminist, was just too much for her time, buried in history only for Parry to find. After appearances all over North America, this is Spin's first ride in Winnipeg, which happens to coincide with the 100th anniversary of Manitoban women's right to vote. Writer, performer, and multiple Dora nominee Evalyn Parry joins us now in the Diamond Lane. Welcome to Winnipeg and to Classic 107.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you in the studio. I was so moved last night.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say. How did you come upon this miraculous story of Annie Londonderry?
Well, I set out to create a show that would bring together my career as a singer-songwriter and also my practice as a theater artist. I wanted to make something new, a new sort of hybrid form. And I thought, I'm a lifelong cyclist and lover of the bicycle.
Right.
And I thought the bike would be, as someone who's like obsessed with words and metaphors and multiple meanings of words, I thought the bicycle had plenty of scope as a writer to investigate kind of why do I love it so much? Why do I have this special feeling about my bicycle? So that was really the very personal beginning of it. And then I had heard that there was a connection between the early feminist movement and the bicycle in the 19th century. And I didn't know anything about it, but I thought, well, that fits my parameters. I love cycling. I love feminism. I am interested to find out what I can. And as soon as I began to research that topic, it opened up a literal goldmine of stories and characters from history. And very quickly, I stumbled on the story of Annie Londonderry, who, as you've said, is the first woman to ride around the world in 1895. And just sort of that sentence alone is like, what?
Yeah.
A woman rode around the world in 1895. I couldn't believe this. Like, I just was kind of amazed when I came across it. And for the same reason that you point out of like, why haven't I heard of her?
Right.
Like, I'm someone who pays attention to these things,
Right.
you know? And so it was a bit of a revelation and really inspired me. And the chorus of the song that I wrote, would you take a dare, would you take a wager? This is sort of this refrain inside of it, because she did this ride on a wager between two businessmen that bet that a woman couldn't ride around the world in 15 months and all these other stipulations attached to it. But I was really it struck a personal chord in me to wonder, like, would I, even today, given, how much more technically advanced bicycles are and road infrastructure around the world and women's rights, like, just to mention a few things, like, would I today have the guts to do what she did 120 years ago? So that really provoked a big question for me, and a big, just brought many themes together inside of Spin.
So this hero of yours, Annie Londonderry, in a way, I mean, you alluded in the show last night when I was there to your 20-something experience in Montreal cycling through the wintertime. Do you still, just two-part question, do you still cycle in the wintertime?
I do.
You do?
Although I'm not as intrepid as I once was, I must admit. I try in Toronto. I live in Toronto now, which is a much easier climate for year-round cycling.
Yeah.
So I usually draw the line when the bike lanes fill up with snow and there's not really room. And another refrain from the show is, I don't want to ride at the side of the road.
Right.
So that sort of notion, anyway, that gets in the way of my winter cycling. But yes, I am an all-season rider.
That's notable. And how did Annie shape your journey as a writer and performer and cyclist?
Well, certainly because her show became, my show, her story, her story became such a central story inside of Spin, this show that I made. it feels like, I mean, it's had multiple impacts. It certainly inspired me to create the show, and then I've had the opportunity to take the show all over, not all over the world yet, but I hope we'll, get beyond this continent for sure. So it feels like a very significant thing to bring this story to other people who've never heard of her. And for the most part, that is, it's a very common reaction that people come up to me afterwards and have that same reaction that I had of like, I can't believe I've never heard of her. Like, this is unbelievable. So it's also connected me with some of Annie's ancestors. And the show, it's a little, I don't want to get too much into the spoiler piece.
Right. It was a shock for me too. So I got all weepy. So folks, make sure you have some Kleenex, because I did. I got all weepy when it happened. I was going to ask you about this twist that happens about 2/3 of the way through the show. And I'm going to refrain because it's just too good. It was too good. That moment just struck me so strongly. Now, the show is based around Londonderry and around you, of course, and your experience as a woman and as a cyclist, but also around this bicycle. So tell us how conceptually, sonically, Brad became part of this project. Brad Hart, percussionist, rigged up a bike with contact mics in key places, plays with sticks, with bows with his hands, on the spokes, on the seat. How did the collaboration begin between you and Brad Hart?
Yeah, we've played music for many years together. So he was the drummer in my band. And
what band was that, may I ask?
Just really under my own name. It was me being a singer-songwriter.
Cool.
Yeah. So I have a collection of different people that I play with, but Brad was a pretty constant as a drummer and backup singer, and we'd been playing music together for quite some time. And when I began to develop this project, I approached him and said, I'm developing this sort of song cycle around this theme of bicycling, and what do you think about trying to use a bike as a percussion thing? I had a theater festival that I was signed up to do new work, and so we decided to give it a try.
Cool.
And it was only after the first try that was a very acoustic experiment. And then we hooked up with another sound artist who's part of our circle of friends and colleagues who had the idea to put contact mics on the bike, Anna Frizz. And so Anna became part of the project too. And the contact mics were really the thing that kind of opened up the bike as an instrument, because a contact mic is different than sort of mic you speak into. It picks up physical vibrations. So every sound when Brad hits the bike with his hands or sticks or brushes or whatever, it picks up the sound of that part of the bike. So the fender sounds really different than the seat, for example, and the spokes can be tuned, which I discovered as I was researching that sometimes mechanics actually will true a wheel by tuning the spokes. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And we got in, as soon as they were amplified, we could hear, indeed, they played different notes, and you could actually, tune them with a little wrench to adjust that pitch.
Hardcore expertise.
Yeah. So all these things started to just open up, and really Brad spent, as I was developing the material, Brad was learning this new instrument, and he plugs in the microphones into a board so he can adjust high and low frequencies and volume, and then he also has them rigged through a loop station so that he can layer beats, so create one layer and add another and another and another on top of that. So it was the show definitely, it has continued to evolve over the course of time of touring it, and certainly the instrument has evolved along with that. It's been a series of discoveries and explorations.
It sounds magical. Now, in the development of the show, you and Anna and Brad put together an album that was released in 2011 called Spin. Are the stories on the album similar to what we see in the theater?
More or less. The album and the show at that point had a few songs in it that aren't in it anymore, and a few new songs have been added that really, as the spoiler that we won't give away, sort of added a new ending to the show. So. But the album, I think what's neat about the album, it really solidified a lot of the first arrangements for the songs. And we worked with producer Don Kerr, who's one of the Rio Statics and a collaborator with, I think the record that really inspired me to want to work with Don was actually his work on the album about the Group of Seven. That is a Rio Statics album, very conceptual album that explores the Group of Seven paintings. It's a beautiful record. And I sort of knew instinctively Don would be a cool
right
person to work with a rigged up bicycle. And indeed, we had a great time in the studio finding more possibilities for this interesting instrument. And yes, so the record itself, like almost all of the songs that you hear in the show are there mostly in sequence, certainly including the Ballad of Annie Londonderry. And there's a few extra songs now on the record that you don't hear in the show anymore because they got pulled for one reason or another. And then there's still a bit more recording to be done. We have released just a digital version of one of the new songs, and there's still one more to be recorded. So those are downloadable from the website if people have already bought the album. But yeah, much like the show has changed. I mean, the record stands as it becomes a testament to time in the way that every record is a record of a moment when the show was one thing, and I love it for that. And I think I certainly stand behind those original arrangements. I really love. And of course, this version of the show that Winnipeg audiences are seeing has an arrangement for string trio.
Right, Michael Holt.
That's right. So Michael Holt is another collaborator of Don Kerr's, and we invited him into the project because I had always, in the back of my mind, had more grand visions.
Well, you referred to it as a song cycle, which I found that it very much was in a dramatized way. From a child of art song myself, like that's where I live. I was taken on a journey as though it were, a 19th century cycle. It could have been conceptually, which was really great. But the overture, I have to say, was so stunning, using great themes from the rest of the show. Michael Holt, was he responsible for that overture for the string trio? And I have to mention your string players, Kathleen Kajioka, violin, Angela Rudden, viola, and Kevin Fox on the cello, as well as singing the backup vocals. Was he responsible for Anna's... Because in her absence, is he responsible for Anna's harmonies?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Because Brad was singing also.
Yes.
It's an amazingly multi-talented group that you're working with.
Yeah, it's true. I don't think it could work in any other way because we all have to play a lot of roles.
Yeah.
Which I think is often the way it works in the sort of spirit of independent theater, which has really began as a very scrappy independent show.
But that's what it keeps it engaging for audiences. It keeps us moving with you rather than in a stasis. I find with small shows often, and I think this is something that often people are skeptical about. With smaller shows, sometimes you get a little stuck in one image, in one tableau, I guess. But I never at any point last night felt like there was static. There was a static moment. It was always moving forward. I'm sorry, I'm gushing. We should continue talking about the show.
Keep going.
No, please. So when did director Ruth Maddock-Jones become involved in this whole process?
She was involved fairly early on. We did a sort of initial workshop that brought together Anna Frizz, who was the original non-bicycle percussionist but contributing musician, and Ruth. And at that point, our designer, Beth Cates, had not come on board yet, I think, when Ruth came on. But we knew we were sort of in that early workshop. We knew where we were headed. We knew that we wanted someone who could do pretty elaborate video visuals to accompany the whole piece.
Right.
So
which illuminates some of the wordplay early in the show as well, which is so great. And anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, that was always part of the vision too for me, to make this, to separate this from a concert, and to kind of give it a real three-dimensionality. And because in the research, I was so inspired by the imagery, right? The historical imagery around. And part of what's amazing about the history of the bike, not only the connection to the early feminist movement and how it really became a symbol for that movement, but it also is this moment in history. It's a nexus of so many things happening. So including, photography is really starting, and even early moving pictures, et cetera, is happening there in the 1890s. And so some of the images are so fantastic of all these early riders. Especially amazing to us modern women is the image of a woman in a corset and a floor-length skirt riding a bike seems so counterintuitive.
Very absurd, but also magical.
But
and speaking
magical.
of your vision of these images being so inspiring for you, this is a bit of relatively recent news. You are stepping into the shoes of artistic directorships of a theater instrumental in your own artistic development. Tell us a little bit about Buddies in Bad Times.
Yeah, Buddies in Bad Times Theatre is my new gig as artistic director. I've just started in September. And Buddies is Canada's, and in fact, the world's largest and longest running queer theatre company.
Awesome.
It's based in downtown Toronto in the Gay Village. And it's a place that, has been a real home for my work over the last decade. And it's a really exciting new opportunity that's going to involve me getting to do my own work there as well as program lots of other amazing artists and collaborate. I mean, I think collaboration is always the name of the game for any theater artist, but I certainly, Spin is a great example of, something that began as a collaboration and has grown and grown and grown and just included more and more amazing artists to bring it to the fullness that's been able to be realized.
And so that vision also then for your tenure, which is coming up very soon. You start this coming season, right?
I've sort of already begun, but I didn't program this season. So the program or the season in Toronto is going on while I'm in Winnipeg. It's all happening. And when I get home, actually next month, I go into rehearsal for a show that was programmed prior to me taking on the artistic directorship, but it's a new play that I've written and will be acting in. Not a musical thing this time, a play called Gertrude and Alice that's about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. So early feminist queer icons of the 20th century.
Amazing.
And it's a pretty interesting experimental show that brings Gertrude and Alice to life in the 21st century. They come to visit a modern audience and find out how history has remembered them or not.
How brilliant.
So that's
so fun.
What's going on next.
Well, and how do you think the artistic directorship will hinder or advance your work as a writer, performer, singer-songwriter?
It's going to be an interesting dance. I mean, I think certainly when the board of directors hired me, they were looking for an artist, somebody who's has some capacity also as a administrator and thinking larger than just their own personal career, because of course now I'm in charge of a company that involves a lot more than
huge
just
responsibility.
My thing. So it was a big decision for me to decide to take that on, but it felt in keeping with lots of my interests and kind of values as an artist and a human to be able to, like, the brilliant thing about it is that inside my contract, I am to make something every year. Like, I either get to direct, write, or act in something. So that's built into what it is. And then on top of that, it's about curation and programming and helping be a part of the evolution of a lot of new work.
Brilliant.
Which is mostly what we do at Buddies, is new Canadian work, queer work. And, my dream is that we're able to build the capacity to be able to work with more people, more queer artists from the national scene and even the international scene.
Well, for those of you in Toronto, please go visit Buddies in Bad Times Theatre. And for Winnipeggers venturing over there, check out their season. It's going to be really fun. This work of theatre running now at PTE in Winnipeg has such purpose. From this queer Canadian trailblazer, Evalyn Parry, Spin leaves its audiences with a sense of possibility and empowerment. Nothing could stop Annie Londonderry. So what's stopping any of us? Spin. Now on until January 31st at Prairie Theatre Exchange at Portage Place. For more information or to purchase tickets, go to pte.mb.ca or call the PTE box office at 204-942-5483. Performer, writer, woman extraordinaire, Evalyn Parry. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Diamond Lane on Classic 107.
Thanks, Sarah.
It's been a pleasure. To play you out, one of my favorite female composers, strong enough to support her husband and her own performing career and the kids, Clara Schumann, from her 3 romances for piano, Opus 21, the first movement, and Andante from Irmgard Berg.